everyone, Brandon here from SnowmodRC. Today we are talking about 3D printing related to the scale ROC industry. First off, before we get over to the bench, I want to just say this is my experience and my uses. A lot of people may not agree, or maybe you do, but my whole point here is to give you a start or maybe a inspiration to maybe go get a printer yourself and give it a shot. There are plenty of people that print out there, and everybody has a different opinion in a different way, and everybody has had their individual experiences. So yours may differ a little bit, but the whole point here is just to educate you a little bit and let you know how we do things around here. So let's go over the bench and take a look. Alright, so we are at the bench. This is my Creality CR10S. It is a 300 by 300 by 400 millimeter printer. That is the print volume that you can print. So you can fill basically this entire bed except for probably about that much, all the way around and all the way up to basically right about here. It is a dual Z-axis printer, which is basically letting you know that there are two of these. This is a Z-rod. This is your Z-axis going up, and there's also one on the other side, so it brings everything up nice and even, and it's much stronger. One of the first things I want to say about printers is a lot of the stuff that people encounter as issues happen because of modifications. If you don't understand your printer and you don't know how to tune it, and you're not getting good results of the stock printer, you probably shouldn't modify it. You want to spend your time learning the printer before you go throw a bunch of toys at it that actually will probably make it worse. One of the nice things about this printer, it comes with all the tools needed. These Allens are not the greatest, but again, it comes with all this. You got some wrenches, a screwdriver, flush cutters, a scraper to get the prints off. The nozzle size is the same as our hex nuts on our wheel nuts for our crawlers. So I have my little T-wrench in there to get the nozzle off. Now, as far as modifications, like I said, this thing is mostly stock. I've had this thing for going on, I think, about 2 years. It's hard to remember. But basically, I've done very little. And you've seen, if you followed along with our pages on Instagram and Facebook, you've probably seen the quality we get out of this thing, and this is probably why. One of the first things you want to do, the glass bed that comes on these is not very good. So I went to my local glass shop and they cut me some mirrors. Mirrors are much more flat than normal glass, and they give you much higher adhesion because it is flat. There's no dips in it or anything like that. It's just better all around. So the first thing you probably want to do is go get a better build plate. Second thing you want to do for this printer in particular, the stock extruder, which is this piece right here, this is what pushes the filament into the nozzle and out onto the bed. This part right here from the factory is plastic. So what happens over time, sometimes the filament will wear a groove in the feed hole, and also like maybe this fitting here will get popped out. There's just a few funky things that go on with the plastic one. The aluminum one was probably the best modification I could have ever done. My tension is much better on the filament for what I do, and it's just all around gave me a lot better quality and a lot less problems. Now, going out from the extruder, I have this blue tube here. It's a little dusty, but this blue tube here is called a Capricorn tube. It's a PTFE tubing. The stock tubing for a lot of these Bowden fitting printers, so this would actually be called a Bowden tube. The stock tubing is not rated for higher temperatures, so they usually start to break down above, let's say, 230 C. So remember, most of your printer stuff is going to be in Celsius, not Fahrenheit. So if you're into Fahrenheit, you'll have to convert it or change your firmware to read in Fahrenheit. But most printers all run in Celsius. But anyways, one of the things you want to do is replace this tube here. Not only is it a tighter fit, so your filament can't get little kinks in it inside the tube, but it's also rated to a higher temperature and such, and will not break down like the stock one would. So this is definitely one of the first things you'll want to do. It only costs about 10 bucks. This extruder here, I believe, was like 20, 30 bucks. Now I can't really show you the last modification I did because it's under the fan cover here. But basically what I did is I 3D designed and printed this little part, which keeps the Bowden tube a little higher and straighter, giving it a nice straight entry into the cooling block. And we'll go down here and I'll explain what's inside here. Alright, so basically what we're looking at here, if you're not familiar with printers, this is what would be called the Hotend, or a cooling block, or a extruder assembly. Like, there's a bunch of different names for it, but essentially it's the Hotend and cooling block. This is where all the magic happens. So what happens is the filament gets fed through this tube. It goes into what looks like a radiator, basically. It's kind of just an aluminum piece with a bunch of fins on it, and that is a cooling block, and that's what this fan right here in front keeps cool. It keeps the heat from down here from going up into the tube. So the modification I have here is an all metal one. The stock one from the factory, this tube actually comes down and meets the back of the nozzle. So you can imagine at around 230 C, that heat going back up into that tube can cause some issues. So what this all metal Hotend does is, instead of it coming all the way down, there's actually an aluminum throat inside that this tube sits against, and then the filament passes through that aluminum tube so that this tube never gets hot. It gives you much better results. You don't have what's known as heat creep, which you do not want. And what heat creep is heat from the nozzle creeping back up into the cooling block, causing premature melting of your filament, which will cause a clog, or in worst case scenario, if your nozzle here is not seated properly, the filament will actually back up and come out the threads, and you will end up waking up to this whole entire thing caked full of plastic, and you will have to try to peel it off or basically throw this whole piece away and start again. Now the silicone sock here, this is basically a silicone boot. I can actually pull it off here and show you, maybe, if it'll come off. And it doesn't want to come off right now, but anyways, it's a silicone sock. Now the stock one has like a little insulation blanket, which is essentially the same thing, but the silicone one works very well. It's 10 bucks and you get like a bag of 5, I think. And what that does is it insulates the heating block from the fans and keeps the heat more consistent for the nozzle. So I would recommend definitely switching to a all metal Hotend. This particular one that's inside here is from Micro Swiss, which also sells this tubing, so I just got everything from them. Yeah, and that's about it. That is all I have really done to this printer. Now, for those of you wondering, maybe watching this and you're just looking for a little education, so front to back, this would be your Y-axis. And the reason I have my little notes on here is mostly just for showing people when they come over, and even my family, they, just so they understand when I'm talking. It's nice to be able to explain things to people. And this would be your X-axis, so going across here, which would be this right here, sliding back and forth. And then up and down would be your Z-axis. And so basically, one of the first tips I could give you on printing is, especially if it's a long, thin object, basically the one thing you want to do is make sure that the longest axis of your model is along the Y. Now some people might be like, oh, why is that? Well, if you turn it this way, and this is going back and forth, as it gets taller, it may start to sway, because this stuff moves really fast. I mean, you're talking sometimes upwards to about 500 millimeters per second. The acceleration of these things is incredible. So if you put it on the Y, when this moves back and forth, the print doesn't sway or move, and you get much better results. Another common problem that people have is printing too fast. You have to remember that this has to be able to keep up with what you're asking of it, and if you print too fast, you're going to get some issues in itself. These printers can print really fast. I think this one is advertised to print upwards of about 100 millimeters per second. To be honest, I only usually print around 30 because I prefer quality over speed. So these are all things you might want to consider when you are setting up your printer. Now, hopefully you found this informative, and if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments below, and we will get back to you as soon as possible. Again, these are the companies I use for my stuff. My next upgrade is going to be a direct drive extruder, which is basically all this stuff right here will be moved onto the X. So this motor here and all that will be on here, and basically this tube will be almost non-existent, and it'll feed directly from here straight in, which allows much better control of filament, especially with flexibles. So that is my next thing. It's about 60 bucks. I already have the other part under here, so that saves me money. I just got to buy the bracket. But if you are into flexibles, direct drive extruder is probably something you might want to look at. I know for our particular industry, most people use PLA and ABS, in which case this will probably print fine. Do understand that if you're going to print ABS though, you might actually want to build an enclosure around this to help keep the heat constant, so you don't have issues. ABS can be very picky. Anyways, that's my printer. Hopefully you guys found this informative. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything, please leave them down in the comments and I would be happy to answer them. Well, again, this is what works for me. It's worked really good so far. It's allowed me to do things like my flatbed on my 79 series and a few other things. So hopefully this will inspire you to get out there and try a new thing for yourself. But again, remember, learn it, use it, tune it, and then modify. Even if you think you need to modify, if you don't know the printer, modifying it is not going to do you any good. So with that being said, we are out of here. We'll see you next time. Have a good day, everybody.